ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धस्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्तिर्नस्ताक्षोररिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरि ओम. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. While praying with steady limbs, may we attain the lifespan allotted to us. May Indra bestow well-being on us. May Pushan, the god of the earth, who is all-knowing, bestow well-being on us. May Garuda, the destroyer of evil, bestow well-being on us. May Brihaspati bestow well-being on us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So in the last class, we were mainly studying the last mantra of the previous chapter and the first mantra of this concluding chapter, which describes the fact that if we approach a realized soul with the idea, with the expectation to fulfill our worldly desires, know it for certain, if he blesses, it is bound to be fulfilled. And if we approach without any desires, yearning for spiritual illumination, that also is something which can be materialized, which is possible by his blessing. And that's these two ideas, as has been spoken of in the last mantra of the previous chapter and the first mantra of this concluding chapter of Mundaka Upanisad. This idea is surmised in the second mantra, which we just studied, which just started studying in the last class, which we will elaborate on again in this class. So let us start with the second mantra of the concluding chapter of Mundaka Upanishad, the second mantra of the second chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanishad. What it says, Kaman yah kamayate manyamanah sa kamabhir jayate tatra tatra paryapta kamasya kritatmanastu ihaiva sarve praviliyanti kamaha. So he who cherishing objects desires them, kaman yah kamayate manyamana. This manyamana word is very significant. He broods over only the positive side of all the desires. When we are brooding over the desires, we see the desires to be very flowery. We never see the negative side of it. And that's how we go on desiring, and we do get. Whatever we desire, we do get. But when we get it, we find that it was not only that flowery which we thought. It entails in dissatisfaction, leading to all sorts of suffering. So that's being indicated that what you ask for will be granted. Kaman ya kamayate. But what you are thinking, that all those thoughts of happiness, thoughts of all positive aspects, which you are thinking to be associated with the objects of your desires, beware of that. That need not be, that will never be materialized. It has to be associated with the sorrow. The happiness has to be associated with sorrow. Birth is associated with death. They are the obverse and the reverse of the same coin. In this life, we can never think of happiness without sorrow. We cannot think of all goods without evil. They are the obverse and the reverse of the same coin. So the word manyamana is very important. That we think, we brood over all the so-called this good qualities, and we desire, and it do gets granted. Whatever we desire, we get, but still we suffer. That all our desires is fulfilled, but we never get rid of the dissatisfaction, because when we are desiring that manyamana, we are brooding only on the positive side of it. We forget that all our happiness has to be associated with sorrow, with dejection, with struggle, with dissatisfaction. So, kamanya kamayate manyamana, sa kamabhir jayate tatra tatra. Whatever you desire, you are taken there. You are gravitated to the circumstances which entails in the fulfillment of all those desires. Kamabhir jayate. You are being taken, you are carried, you are being gravitated to all those circumstances where your desires are bound to be fulfilled. And the next line speaks of the one who is dissatisfied with this constantly chasing after the illusory pleasures of life. And they become paryapta kama, enough of it. That in Sanskrit, there is a pratyaya called alam. Alam means enough. I have had enough of it. So the paryapta speaks of that alam pratyaya, that enough of all the so-called chasing after the desires. The one who has become paryapta kama. How he becomes? By becoming kritatma. Krita atma, being established in his self, who has become swastha. He no more chases after the so-called engagements of life, dives deep within. Ihaiva sarve pravilyanti kama. All the so-called petty desires vanish, rendering him tranquility, peace, and which entails in the liberation. The peace, the tranquility, the equanimity, which we all cherish. That's what is attained when one can stop chasing after the desires and get established in the self. So what has been discussed in the concluding mantra of the last chapter and the first mantra of this present chapter is being surmised in this mantra. So what it speaks of, that whatever we desire, we get, but still we are dissatisfied. The word manyamanas is significant. It means to brood over. That is to say, to contemplate on the good qualities. So it speaks of remembering only the climax and forgetting its evaporation. So we constantly is being deluded by the so-called prakriti, the nature. Once we are, because of the ignorance, are within the fold of nature, the nature makes us its tool to sustain itself. All the desires, the fulfillment of the desires, which we discuss again and again, doesn't in any way ensures our happiness. The happiness is a tool devised by the nature to make us do certain things by which it is sustained. That if we try to find out the nature of happiness, what it is, that all our happiness is the result of the fulfillment of the desires. What are the various desires we have? Our scriptures have categorized all the desires into three categories. All the desires can at last be categorized into these three categories. What they say, putraishana, vittaishana, yashaishana. The desire for progeny, the desire for wealth, and desire for name and fame, establishment in life. All the three actually speaks of sustenance of the nature. Putraishana we need not explain. Of course, by our progeny, the nature is sustained. Nature continues through our progeny. Vittaishana, unless I sustain myself, I cannot think of progeny. So vitta, indirectly, it speaks of sustenance of nature. Yasha also speaks of sustenance of nature. That we are all struggling for name and fame so that we get the better chance to propagate our genes. If you can establish yourself in life, you are become compatible, you become an eligible bachelor in the present word, the term we can say, and you're an eligible, compatible bachelor, eligible bachelor. So the chance of propagating your genes become more. So yasha also is linked with the propagation of the nature. And the nature has devised these ashanas in such a way, the moment it is fulfilled, you will get happiness. And for that happiness, we chase after the desires. When we get it, but now you just study the nature of the happiness, the moment we reach the climax, our desire is fulfilled, we are tremendously happy. In the words of the present biological language, the happy hormone is released. Dopamine is released. You are full of happiness. But immediately after some time, it evaporates. It doesn't remain in the climax. Why? Again, the nature knows very well that if we are satiated forever, we won't try for vitta, we won't try for progeny, we won't try for yasha. And that ultimately will speak of the disintegration of nature. We have to try again and again. And that's why what they have done, the nature has devised happiness in such a way you get happiness, but the next moment it evaporates. After that, very, very interesting thing. The third thing is also very interesting, that we always remember the climax. We always forget the evaporation. And that's what is being indicated by the word manyamana in this sloka, that we always brood over these positive things. That's the plan of the nature. And we forget all the negative aspects. And that's why we say that past is always golden. The nature has devised, the nature has been planned in such a way that we remember only the positive sides of what has happened. The negative sides are filtered out. And that's why the past is always golden. Anyone you ask the past, oh, it was so nice. Why? That we forget the struggles, we forget the evaporation, we remember only the climax. And the fourth way you will find that whenever we are anticipating, aspiring, there is so much adventure in it. And the moment when we are in it, the desire which we wanted, we are in it, already it has started evaporating. You will find there is more happiness in anticipation than in the real enjoyment. From the morning you were planning to go to the restaurant and enjoy the food, so much thrill you had when you were planning. But when you are sitting in the restaurant and having the food, it's already gone. All the fun is gone. You start feeling the plateau. The valley you have reached the valley. It's a flat land. No more. That happiness has as if evaporated, went off. Why? That nature's work was to motivate us to do that thing. So through anticipation, it has motivated us. Once we are doing it, now the nature doesn't need to give us happiness. It used the happiness as a tool. It was not as a prize. It was just as a tool to make us do certain things. So it has succeeded. So you find there is no more happiness. So now you will find that with our desires, whatever we desire, nature gives us. But it fools us by filtering our memory in such a way that when we are brooding over the happiness, we only think of the so-called the good qualities, the positive sides of it. The negative thing we forget. And that's going on, birth after birth. The next question comes that happiness which we get, where we were saying that the nature gives us the happiness when the desire is fulfilled. But know it for certain, it is not the nature which gives us happiness. The nature doesn't have the capacity to give us even a stinge, a small, a speck of happiness. It doesn't have the capacity. As Shankaracharya, Shankaracharya in Bhagavad Gita commentary, he's very nicely, very strongly, he's asserting that fact that na sansare sukhasya gandha matram api asti. That even the slight fragrance of happiness, a tinge of happiness, a speck of happiness is not there in this samsara. It doesn't have the capacity. then the happiness which we get when our ashanas, desires are fulfilled, from where it comes? That's of the self and self alone. It is not the desire that gives us happiness. With the fulfillment of desires, there is a state of desirelessness. When we reach that state of desirelessness, the happiness is of the soul, of our self. That is percolating through our mind and body. It's no more filtered out. It is filtered out only when my mind is turmoil because of all those desires. As that example which we give again and again, the Swami Vivekananda illustrates so nicely that when the lake is disturbed, it is full of waves and the water is turgid, I cannot see the bottom of the lake. But when the water is transparent and calm, I can see the bottom. Swamiji is saying that our mind is like that lake, and the bottom of the lake is our self, which is Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa. That Ananda Swarupata is obscured as long as the water is turgid and full of waves. It speaks of all our desires which we cherish in our mind, that disturbing the mind. And when an intense desire first engulfs all other desires, we find it's very common in our mind. When you have an intense desire, all the small desires have vanished. So there's only one huge wave in your mind. The moment that gets satisfied, for the time being, the mind is tranquil. From where the happiness comes, its nature doesn't have the capacity. It is a self, which is as if like the bottom of the lake. Just the way when the lake is calm, you can see the bottom of the lake. When the mind, the lake called mind is calm, all the desires has been fulfilled for the time being. The self, the Ananda Swarupata, percolates through your body, mind, senses. It is the happiness of the self and self alone, however crude may be our desires. When it is fulfilled, we are as if communing with the self, but it is just for a fraction. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, it is just like the drop of water falling on a red hot cauldron. How long it stays? Immediately it evaporates. Our happiness is just like that. Just for the time being, the mind is tranquil, the self percolates. We are communing with the self for the time being, unknowingly, but we are mistaking it to be the happiness given by the nature. That's the ignorance. It is coming from the self, but we think the object which I have attained, that has given me the happiness. But it doesn't have the capacity. The nature doesn't have the capacity to give us even a speck of happiness. As again and again, Sankaracharya is saying, Na sangsare sukhasya gandha matram api asti. This word gandha matram is important. When you are cooking a delicacy, you are yet to enjoy it, but the fragrance has spread all over and you start enjoying. You are yet to take the food. Just the smell of it is something which you enjoy, you relish. You start relishing through the smell. That's why they say this granena ardha bhojanam, that half of your craving is gone just by the smell. So here Shankaracharya is saying that even that's little from the smell of happiness that nature has no capacity to give. It is the self and self alone which is finding expression as bliss through our psychophysical entity. When the desire is fulfilled, for the time being, the mind is no more filtering, it is calm, it is no more filtering the bliss aspect of ourself. But because of ignorance, we think the thing which we have attained, that has given me happiness. And that entails in that hedonistic treadmill of avidya, kama, karma. Because of ignorance, the desire arises. From that, we get involved in some action. And this, like a hedonistic treadmill, ever running, never reaching. We are ever chasing after the desires, thinking that it is going to give us fulfillment. It never gives us fulfillment. We are ever dissatisfied, ever running, never reaching, nor even a distant glimpse of shore. In the words of Swami Vivekananda, in his poem, how nicely he's saying, that's the nature of happiness. So then the question is, then what's the way out? The way out is that once you realize that it is the self and self alone which is the source of all the bliss, then the question comes of remaining in the self. In this world, now we find there is so much of that depression because of aloofness, isolation. We think that as we get isolated from the society, that this is a common term nowadays used, that a human being is a social being. Without being social, he cannot have psychological well-being. But very interesting. Yes, we say that during the COVID, the isolation has increased the psychological issues. But is it a fact? You will find even when there is no, as such, there's a restriction because of some pandemic, people are so much involved, socializing, partying constantly with the society, and then they feel they're totally drained, exhausted. They'll feel that though they are mixing with all, something they are lacking. They never feel that happiness. They're as if everything is as if so superficial. There is no touch, the real touch. The real touch is the touch of the self. That's why in Sanskrit they use the word swastha. Sometimes without knowing its meaning, we use the word swasth. By the word swasth, we mean that the state of health, disease-free state is swastha. But actually the word swastha means, it came from swa plus tha. Tha means sthita. To remain established in what? In swa, in yourself. So swastha means the one who is established in his own self. He alone is free from disease. The word disease is very significant. Dis-ease is disease. Your ease has gone. When the ease has gone, the moment we are no more established in ourselves, through our senses and mind, we are projecting outside, chasing after the so-called worldly pleasures, thinking that they are going to give us happiness. We are totally drained because nature has planned in such a way that whatever desire we may have, it will and ultimately give us. But the happiness which we thought is going to be with us forever just evaporates in no time, making us feel that totally, drained. We feel that we are drained and the life has lost all its charm. That for all the endeavors we had for attaining the so-called worldly pleasures, the moment we get it, its charm is gone. Because that's the plan of the nature. It is never going to give us satisfaction. And the little happiness which we get is from the self. The one who has realized that is constantly trying to be kritatmana. The word kritatmana in this mantra speaks of this swastha, to remain in the self. That his all endeavor is to remain in the self. And that alone can lead to paryapta kama. When you are no more chasing for the sensate pleasures of life, you are diving deep within and trying to remain in association, in eternal companionship with the soul, then alone you can become paryapta kama. All the desires then fall off. In this life, we find that what's the way of getting rid of desire? We cannot force out the so-called desires in our life. But the desires do vanish in our life. How? Whenever we have a higher desire, the lower desires falls off. We find that when I have enjoyed a delicacy, some other food which we enjoyed previously gives no more taste to us. We go for that delicacy, which is superior. Our relations, that we find that whenever a new relation gives us happiness, the old relation automatically falls off. A small child, when it is growing, it is so much attached to the mother. When it goes to the school, it develops a peer group. The love for the peer group, you will find gradually is distancing him from the parent. It's a common thing. It happens. And when again he gets married, the happiness, the conjugal happiness, makes him forget the so-called the peer group. So every time we find that as we go for the new attachment comes, the older attachment automatically falls off. But here it is saying that you become paryapta kama. There is no question of falling off, because this is the highest. The self, which is the source of all happiness, once you're established in it, there is no question of chasing after the small trivial pleasures of life. As no one will be digging a well in the bank of Ganges. He is a fool who digs a well in the bank of the ocean or the bank of the river. This eternal source of perennial source of water is flowing. What's the need of digging a well? So paryapta kama speaks of that all the so-called sensuous pleasures of life falls off once you become kritatma. You get established in the self, which is the source of all bliss. Then all the desires falls off paryapta kamas. And then only that ihaiva sarve, in the self, all the desires as if merge. Praviliyante kamaha. As in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, the last sloka speaks of that. Just as in the ocean, that so many rivers, water bodies are going and merging in the ocean. But does it disturb the ocean? Does the level of the ocean in any way is disturbed, is rising or falling? No, it remains same. So all the waters are entering into it. Similarly, all our desires enter into that self, the eternal self, merges in that without disturbing it. It is that equanimous self in which all are merged, because that alone is the source of all happiness. Once you reach the source, all other channels becomes trivial. You are no more interested in all the small channels through which you are getting the tits and bits of happiness. All the worldly happiness, what it speaks of aspiring the right thing in the wrong way. Because of ignorance, we are trying to get that eternal happiness which comes from the self and self alone through all those worldly desires, which are narrow, distorted channels through which a speck of happiness can be attained. But we cannot continue with it. So we are aspiring the correct thing, but we have taken the wrong path. So the first line speaks of the same aspiration for which we are misdirected. We can go for the same aspiration with the proper orientation when we become kritatmana. Swastha, try to remain in the self, no more chasing after the so-called the trivial pleasures of life, which in no way can give us happiness. It's the biggest paradox of life. With all our intelligence, with all our learning, but we may be so much intelligent that this simple fact never somehow gets saturated in our mind. With our intelligence, we go for wealth, we go for position in life, all those things we go for. But constantly we are being fooled, that common sense, that the most, Swami Vivekananda used to say a very interesting thing, that the most uncommon thing in this world is the common sense. It needs just a common sense to realize this fact, that nothing is permanent. All these are trivial. However, I may try to make myself be remembered by all. It's just a matter of fact. As long as you are in the society trying to have some prominent position, for the time being you may feel, oh, people are all eluding you. It just takes a little absence out of that. The English they say, out of sight, out of mind. Everything is forgotten. All your attempts, knowingly, unknowingly, to have that establishment in life just falls off. The moment you are out of sight, you're out of mind, gone. For what all this chasing after, this so-called social engagements and all, is of no use. It's just draining. So have the courage to step back and get established in the self. It needs that. Swami Vivekananda, when he was in the West, he used to say that you think that the so-called the Hindus, those who are from the Indian civilization, this Hindu background, they are very feeble, they are very weak, they are very cowardly. But for you, the courage is just to stand in front of the gun, stand in front of the opposite enemy with all the weapons, and to face the enemy in the battle is the courage. That's one dimension of the courage. The courage has so many other dimensions. The one who says that I want nothing but the self and self alone. It needs tremendous courage, tremendous strength that will be spoken of in the succeeding mantra in this chapter only, the fourth mantra. We are studying the second. The fourth mantra, it will speak, Nayamatma balahinena labhya. The one who is weak, who always is bothered about that what will happen if this so-called knots, the social knots breaks off, and is constantly afraid of that. For him, spiritual life is of no use. That will be spoken of in the fourth mantra. So it needs a tremendous courage to step back. If I really want my welfare, that in all the religions we speak of selflessness, that we shouldn't be selfish. Our Ranganathanji used to say that we never speak of selflessness. We speak of selfishness. But that selfishness is enlightened selfishness. What's that enlightened selfishness? To know what is really good for me. That all the things which I am thinking is good for me is actually deluding me. The real goodness lies in being established in the self, to become Kritatma. That is the enlightened selfishness. Go for that. And then only all the so-called desires can as if just simply merge in that eternal source of happiness and joy, and rendering you that freedom. No more there will be the urge for chasing after these trivial pleasures of life. You can have a bird's eye view of the working of the nature and can easily come out of it. So that's the thing which is being indicated in the second mantra of this chapter. So once you are swasth, established in the self, that's what meant by the word Kritatma, then alone you can become Paryapta Kama. So how it happens? By contemplating on the self, ultimately the ego is annihilated. That's the idea which we speak again and again, that all our desires are ultimately hooked to the ego, that I am this limited being, I am this limited psychophysical existence. To this idea, to this notion, all the desires are hooked, just the way all the spokes of a wheel is connected to the hub of the will. Similarly, all the desires are connected to the hub, the ego. Is constantly trying to remain established in the self by developing that Brahmakara vritti, that I am the Brahman. I'm not this body, not the mind, not the senses. I'm the Brahman, the Atman, which is bereft of all the stimuli-response conditioning, which speaks of all the desires, and beyond that. This is the thing which as if hammers the hub of our psychophysical existence, the ego, constantly. And once that is, can get rid of that, all the spokes are bound to fall off. All the desires falls off, rendering you that spiritual emancipation, freedom, which we have already studied in the 8th mantra of the second chapter of the second part of this same Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad. What was that mantra? Vidyate hridaya granthi, chidyante sarva sangshayaha, kshiyante chasya karmani, tasmin drishte paravare. Once you realize that self, by becoming paryapta kama, when all the desires has fallen off, then the hridaya granthi, all the knots of the heart, they are cut asunder. Vidyate hridaya granthi. So that if the ego is the heart in which all the desires are knotted, they all fall off all at once. They all fall off. Chidyante sarva sankshaya. Once they fall off, you experience the core of your being, which at present we are deluding to be a limited ego, becomes something ineffable. It cannot be explained what you are experiencing, but it is noetic. These are the words used even in psychology. Noetic means you're experiencing something which is not imagination. It is a fact, but at the same time, it is ineffable. You cannot explain it. So that gives you the conviction. At present, when I'm thinking of the self, it is an imagination. What I have read in the book, with the help of that, I'm trying to imagine. But when, because of the Brahmakara Vritti, constant contemplation of the self, when the hub called the ego has been, has been removed, and all the mental modules falls off, leading to the realization. That realization is ineffable, but noetic. You cannot explain. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "Kamun ghee na jamun ghee." Just the way when you taste the clarified butter, it has a taste. But as that taste is almost without any attributes, it's almost impossible to explain. The self, which is beyond attributes, can be experienced, but cannot be explained. That's what it is, experienceable, but not describable. So that's what, so that speaks of that experience, speaks of real knowledge. When you experience anything, then only all the doubts vanish. As long as I have not seen the ocean, I've read it in the textbook, someone may come and convince me there is nothing called ocean, and I may believe. But once I have seen the ocean, it's no more just a book knowledge. It's no more a conceptual knowledge. I have seen the ocean. Then however one may try to convince that there is nothing called ocean, I won't argue. I will keep silent, thinking that he is a mad person speaking nonsense. There's no question of argument. Argument comes only when I am yet to be convinced of convinced about the knowledge. Only realization can give us that conviction. Then you are established in that knowledge. Then nothing can deviate you from that. Shankaracharya, a person of such a keen intellect, the world has produced very few persons of that keen intellect. He, after writing the commentary on the Prasthanatraya, is very nicely saying that I have written the commentary on all the the pillars of our scriptures, the Shruti Pramana, the Smriti Pramana, and this Nyaya Pramana. The Upanishad is the Shruti, the Gita is the Smriti Pramana, and the Brahma Sutras, the Nyaya Pramana. I have written the commentary on all of them, and I have established the Advaita through argument, that this is the highest knowledge. After saying that, very interesting thing is saying, but still someone more intelligent me then come and simply prove my convictions, my arguments to be false. He can do that. But what one cannot do is can take away my conviction. That comes only through realization. Intellectuality is a double-edged sword with which we can prove anything, we can also disapprove anything. Anything. You go to the court, you will find that it's possible that the way the lawyer proceeds with the proceedings of the legal procedure, on that depends the winning or the losing of the case. Sometimes we find that most probably it has nothing to do with the fact. It has a way how we present it. We all know that. What it shows, that intellectuality is a double-edged sword with which we can prove anything, disapprove anything. But the one who has witnessed a thing, however you may go on giving reasons, you may win the case or lose the case. So the one who is a witness, you can never deviate him from his conviction. He has seen it. The lawyer may come and say that what he has seen is not true. But can you ever make that person believe that? Never. He has seen with his eyes. You can never make him believe that it is not true. So knowledge alone is that experience. So that's being spoken of in the word sarva sankshidyante sarva sankshaya. All the doubts vanish. All the knots of the heart is cut asunder. Kshiyante chasya karmani. This eternal chase after the trivial pleasures of life speaks of the karma. They fall off. Once you have seen that who is the source of everything high and low. The mind is the high, the product of the mind is the world. The one who is behind the mind, behind the senses, behind the sensate objects, the self who is a witness. One who has seen that, for him, the hridaya, all the knots of the heart is cuts asunder, all the doubts vanish, and this eternal chase after the pleasures of life in the form of karma, that also falls off. And that's being indicated in this mantra, that if you chase after the desires, you get it, but that doesn't enter in paryapta kama. You never get in fulfillment. The paryapta kama, the fulfillment comes only when you become kritatmana, get established in the self, and then alone all the so-called trivial desires falls off, rendering you freedom by establishing in you in the bliss of your own self. So then it may be contended that one should then, to realize the self, how to realize? Or most probably have to study a lot of scriptures in order to realize the Atman. So here to contend that type of idea, to take us beyond that idea, that from that wrong notion, to take us beyond that wrong notion, that we have to study a lot, we have to study scriptures, we have to be learned in the scriptures to get established in self. To read us from that idea, the next mantra says that what's the only criteria for realization. What it says, the third mantra of the second chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanisad. What it says is, it is also again a very, very famous mantra, oft quoted mantra. Nayam Atma, na ayam Atma. Na ayam Atma is Nayam Atma. Nayam Atma pravachanena labhyo. Na medhaya, na bahuna srutena. Yame vaisha vrinute, tena labhya, tasyaisha Atma vibrinute, tanu syam. Na ayam Atma pravachanena labhya. Pravachana. Just by the deliberation, studying of the Vedas. Na ayam Atma labhya. You cannot attain the self by the study of the Vedas, by discussing on the Vedas, by hearing the narration of the Vedas, the chanting of the Vedas. Nayam Atma pravachanena labhya. Na medhaya. This word medha in Sanskrit has a very, very specific meaning. Medha means the capacity to retain what you have heard. That speaks of medha. That we hear so many things, we forget. Some will have the capacity to retain them. The more you have the capacity to retain the knowledge, that speaks of your medha. So you may be very intelligent, you have a tremendous capacity to retain what you have heard. You don't forget them. That speaks of the this medha, this particular aspect of the intelligence, which helps you to sustain, to just nourish the knowledge through the remembrance of it without forgetting. So you cannot attain the self with that type of medha also. Neither by hearing nor by retaining it. Na bahuna srutena. And then I have heard it, and just to get established in what I have heard, I go on studying various other scriptures as references. That's what we do even in our day-to-day life. That something which I have to study, I try to retain what I have studied, and to get established in that knowledge, to be convinced in that knowledge, I will be searching for various other resources by downloading something from the internet or from referring to the textbooks. so that I can nourish the knowledge which I already have, that's get more nourished. It gives me a sense of fulfillment that that encompassment, that I know the knowledge through and through. That's true with all our academic knowledge. But if we think that the self can be attained on the same process, that by adhering to the lecture, retaining it in our memory, and just nourishing it through thousands of references, know it for certain, that's not the way you can attain the self. Nayamatma pravachanena labhyo na medhaya na bahuna sruthena. It cannot be attained by the study of the Vedas, nor through that special type of intelligence which helps us to retain what I have heard, and not through the much learning in the form of just referring to the various scriptures. Then how it is attained? Yame vaishabrinute tena labhya. He who chooses the Atman, is a very significant word. By him alone, Atman is attained. Yame vaishabrinute tena labhya. How it is attained? The Atman reveals itself to the seeker, its true nature. Tasyaisha Atma vibrinute tanum swam. That I can never attain the Atman. The thing which is myself, how can I attain it? It is always with me. But when I am really intent to realize it, all the things which is obscuring it, that falls up, revealing the Atman, just like a fruit in your hand. Karatala amala kavat. What this mantra speaks of? The idea which we speak again and again. Pravachana. Just, I have not tasted the mango. Someone comes and gives a lecture on the taste of mango. That's the pravachana. Can I ever that way realize the taste of mango, have the knowledge of the taste of mango? I may feel I have understood, but that conceptual knowledge has nothing to do with the experiential knowledge. We all understand that when one explains the taste of mango, the one who has not tasted, he may think I have understood. But that understanding is something which is a mere conceptual knowledge, which has nothing to do with the real taste of the mango. The same person, when he tastes the mango, immediately he will realize that all the concepts which I have developed about the taste of mango is false, is of no use. The taste of mango is something which is experienceable only by tasting. So, na pravachana. After hearing about the taste of mango, you have the special capacity to retain all the information you have heard about the taste of mango. And you can become a learned scholar and write a textbook on the taste of mango by just retaining all the things you have about the taste of mango. And you will be much appreciated for those literary quality of all those books. But does it speak that you have really you have the real knowledge of the taste of mango? Still you don't have. It's just the cut and paste you have done. It's that all the intellectual knowledge without nowadays we speak of plagiarism. All knowledge is plagiarism until and unless we have realized. Only when we have realized, that becomes my own. We will find that in the Vedas has been mentioned as apurusha, that no one has written it. And you may say, how can it be that no one has written it? Has it fallen from the skies? But the word apurusha, Swami Vivekananda has explained in a wonderful way. Apurusha means what? That knowledge cannot be patented. Knowledge is universal. We simply discover. Newton never invented gravitation. Gravitation was there. Even before Newton, it was there. Only there was ignorance about it. There was a covering over that. Over the knowledge about gravity, there was a covering. Newton discovered, removed that covering. Nothing else. So the knowledge of gravity is apurusha. It is not that Newton discovered gravity. He is the author of the gravitation. It is apurusha. It was. As rhythm, as truth, it was there. Newton is just the rishi. These words are very important. In Sanskrit, what was the rishi means? Mantra drashta is the rishi. The mantra means the truth, which is always there. It is there. He's just the drashta, he's a seer. So that's why they say Veda is Apaurishya. So all those things are there. It's not that we are going to create them. They will be revealed once the ignorance falls off. So it is the discovery means removing of the cover. Once the covering in the form of ignorance falls off, it reveals itself. That's what being indicated by Ram, Atma Vivrinute Tanuswam. That all the ignorance about the taste of mango, even with the scholar who has written a lot of textbooks on the taste of mango and is yet to taste it, for him, the ignorance falls off, all the covering falls off the moment he tastes the mango. Unless he tastes the mango, all the conceptual knowledge actually adds up to the covering with all those concepts. It is adding up. And when the moment he tastes the mango, in one shot, all the so-called layers of ignorance which he has developed falls up all at once. So that's the idea which is being indicated here, that it is the realization and realization alone that can lead us to that highest good, where all the desires falls off. It's not by the study of the scriptures. It's not by simply cogitating upon them and going on writing commentaries upon it and referring to it. It's not that way. We have to realize all these things, pravachana, medha, shruti, so all these do have meaning when they motivate us for that real practice by which we ourselves can go into that realization. If they cannot motivate us, if they cannot in no way can create that yearning in us, then they are of no use. It just becomes an intellectual gymnastics, nothing else. All those becomes intellectual gymnastic without yielding any result. So to indicate that fact that knowledge alone is realization, this mantra is highlighting that fact. Nayam atma, na ayam atma, pravachanena labhya, na medhaya, na bahuna srutena, yame vaisha, the one who really yearns for it. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Je chai, she pai. Je na chai, take baro bhute na chai. In Bengali, he is making the pun with these words, which is very difficult to translate. It can be translated, but the charm of it you miss. That Je chai, she pai, the one who really wants is bound to get it. Je na chai, the one who doesn't want it, take baro bhute na chai. The 12 ghosts make it dance in their whims. What are those 12 ghosts? The 5 organs of perception, the 5 organs of action, pancha jnanendriya, pancha karmendriya, mana, the mind, and the intellect, the buddhi. That when these 12 ghosts can make us dance around, if we don't want to be swastha, don't want to dive within and get established in the self, then these 12 ghosts can make us dance around. As we have indicated that in one question answer session which I have attended long back, when a student asked a Swami that, have you seen ghost? Everyone laughed, thinking that it says the question which has nothing to do with the youth conference. But the Swami never took it lightly. He did give a very nice answer. He told, yes, I have seen. Even I can show it to you. Just dive within your mind, you can see there's so many ghosts are there, constantly making you jump in their own whims. It is to get rid of those ghosts. This Baro Bhut is within us. So we can get rid of it only if we develop that yearning to become Kritatmana, Swastha, to be established in the self. Otherwise, all this reading of scriptures, this retaining it in our memory and using various reference to nurture that conceptual knowledge is of no use. After saying that, this mantra, the next mantra, is something which we were referring to it previously. We will read it and we will go to its elaborate discussion again in the next class. Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhya. The one who is without strength. This strength is not the physical strength. The strength which Swami speaks of by speaking of 3P: purity, patience, perseverance. The strength of perseverance, to have the patience to continue in this journey. It doesn't speak of the physical strength. It is this strength, the spiritual strength, the strength of your mind, the strength of your resolution. Unless you have that, the Atman cannot be attained. Na atma nayam atma balahinena labhya nacha pramadat tapaso vyapya lingyat. Pramadat, not through delusion. That we will study the scripture, but our attachment to the mundane things in the form of putraishana, vittaishana, yasheshana is so strong. Again and again we forget what we study. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that the village pond is full of scum, the green scum layer. The village, the women folk, they come to clean the utensils. On the bank of the pond, they come, there's this, they sit and they remove the scum. The clear water becomes visible. They clean their utensils, and when they're going back, in no time, the scum comes back and again covers the pond. It is our attachment to the worldly things makes us forgetful again and again. Now by reading the scripture is like removing the scum. For the time being, the intellect seems to be clear. In no time, we again get totally involved with the world, and we become forgetful of what we are aspiring for. That speaks of the pramada, the delusion, which arises from that extreme attachment to the mundane things in the form of putraishana, vittaishana, yasheshana. So you cannot attain Atman with that I'm studying the scriptures, but at the same time, I'm tremendously attached. When someone asks Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that you have created a revolution in the form of Nama Sankirtana, so many people are coming, joining, and they are having that spiritual exuberance. But at last we find that there is no such spiritual evolution for them. They do come, they do have that tremendous exuberance at the time of Kirtana, but again, they get so much attached to the worldly things. Why is it so? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very nicely replied that they are the pots with innumerable holes. All this Kirtana is like the pouring of spiritual treasures into those pots. But all those holes speaks of the desires through which everything is going. Nothing is returned. Everything is flowing out. And that speaks of the pramada. That however we may resort to the study of the scripture, unless we have developed to a certain extent a detachment through all those holes of attachment, all our so-called wisdom is washed off. So that unless and until you can get rid of pramada, there cannot be realization. The next word is na va api alingat. Na va api alingat. Va api alingat. Va api alingat. Alinga means that our renunciation should be having some signs. Shankaracharya says that the tapasa vapyalinga, he translated as knowledge without monasticism. That you have the knowledge, but you have not renounced the world. But that type of translation is extremely specific. The linga speaks of not just resorting to monasticism. It speaks of knowledge without renunciation. That I study, but it has not created any sort of dispassion for the world. So that speaks of that alinga. Linga means the word linga means sign. The word linga means sign. The sign by which I can recognize a thing is the linga. So that if I am studying some scriptures, but it has no as such expression, it finds no expression through my life. I'm the same attached person as I was, same involved with the worldly things as I was. There is no sign of spirituality through my life. Then that becomes alinga. There is no sign. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say very interestingly, that that is, if you are the son of a rich man, you naturally, you just by being the son of a rich man, you inherit that all the riches he has. You inherit. Being the son of a rich man, you inherit the wealth. And now when you say that you are a devotee of God, you're the son of God, and if they find that nothing you have inherited, all the things which are attributed to the as godly qualities, like renunciation, dispassion, wisdom, nothing finds expression through your life. There's no sign of it. Then what the people will think? That they will think that you just are speaking something which is not truth. What you're professing is not truth, because there's no linga, no sign of it. So here this word linga means that the knowledge should be associated with the sign in the form of renunciation, that you have developed certain dispassion for life. So any tapas without that sign find invisible, that cannot take us to the realization. So that is va api alingat, the self cannot be realized. Etair upay air yatate yastu vidwangs tasyaisa atma vishate brahmadhama. So what it speaks of the knower of self who strives through these means just the opposite thing are the thing which you have to strive for. If you're without strength, you have to be with strength. Means you have to have purity, patience, perseverance. That's the strength. If you are full of pramada, you have to go beyond pramada, up pramada, constantly trying to contemplate on the self and to be detached from this flow, from this trivial thing called all these worldly attachments. That is apramada. And you have to have your tapas, all the endeavor, which should find expression as a signature through your life. The tapas, how can I find that my signature is the thing which identifies me? So what is the signature of all my tapas? That all the visible signs of spiritual qualities in the form of renunciation, dispassion, wisdom, whether they're finding expression through your life. It doesn't speak of the conventional renunciation, as our the 12th president Bhutishand used to say. After our sannyasa ceremony, he told us that the cloth, that your sannyas, the so-called sannyas which you had, is just a few pence. Its price is few pence. With a few pence, you purchase that dye with which you have dyed your cloth, made your cloth ochre color. It's a few pence. So that so-called external realization its price is just a few pence. It's not for that you have taken sannyasa. It's for all the divine qualities that has to find expression as a signature of your spiritual life. That alone is the thing which is the proof of your sannyasa. That's the only thing which has the worth. So all your tapas should lead to that signature. The one who has done that, he alone can realize the self. The one who is courageous in the form of having patience and perseverance, and constantly is trying to be apramada, beyond the delusion, and he's trying to internalize the so-called spiritual values through his spiritual endeavors. He alone can at last get established in the self. So we will again take up this fourth mantra and then proceed to the few more mantras with which the Mundaka Upanisad will be concluded. So this last chapter you will find is very specific as per our path, spiritual journey is concerned. It is giving us that what real spirituality is and what it is not. That what generally we take it as spirituality as discussing the scripture, performing some meaningless ritual which has in no way reflects any change in our life. That, of course, that's what we think to be spirituality. That's not. The real spirituality is something that speaks of the internalization. That's what we say, that is finds expression not only through our words, but through our life. Then only it can enter in spiritual liberation. So that's the thing which will be so discussed in this chapter before we conclude the study of the Mundaka Upanishad. So with this, we conclude our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.